A myth in the industry. Winter duvet is a heavy duvet. I come across it all the time. A heavy duvet, this duvet can't be warm because it's not heavy. And the second myth that we come across is that a down duvet cannot be washed. Okay. Down, it refers to the filling. I'm going to answer that question as I'm going to lead up to that. Okay. The fact is, the tog rating is a measure of the warmth and not the weight of a duvet. I'm going to talk about the construction of the duvet and the filling of a duvet a little bit later. I just want you to understand the concept of a duvet and how a duvet works before we move on. The tog rating, I don't know if you've heard of tog rating. Has anyone heard the term tog rating? No? My goodness. Okay, let's go shopping. The tog rating is a measure of the warmth of a duvet. How does a duvet actually work? Does anybody know?
Yes, it traps your heat but allows it to breathe or something.
Absolutely, that's exactly what it does. It traps the heat in. You are the heater. There is no heater inside the duvet. You are the heater. You create the heat in the duvet, and the duvet will trap that heat in. How does it actually do it? Two ways. Filling itself must be an insulator, but the second and probably the most important, not probably, the most important factor is the best insulator is actually air. So what does a duvet do? A duvet traps air, and that is the insulator, and that is what actually keeps the warmth in. The second myth answered, down duvets, if constructed and filled correctly, can be washed. We'll get to that just now. The tog rating is a test that is done in a laboratory where a heater is placed underneath a duvet and temperature sensors are set above the duvet, and they measure the amount of heat that transfers through that duvet, very simplistically. A high tog rated duvet is a warm duvet. It traps more air than a low tog rated duvet. However, it is not the weight of the duvet that determines whether you're going to be warm or not. It is the amount of air that the duvet traps. So typically in South Africa, we would be using tog ratings of 10 to 11 for duvets throughout the year. A summer weight duvet might be 6 or 7 tog. A winter duvet, 10, 11, maybe 12 tog. In Europe, very cold conditions, you may go to a 14 tog. In South Africa, you wouldn't be able to use a 14 tog duvet. It would be just far too hot. Breathability is a very important factor as well. If the duvet is not breathable, you tend to feel hot, and you'll overheat actually under a duvet. Often we'll get into a bed and it feels nice and warm and snuggling, and 2 or 3 hours later you're kicking the duvet off because it just gets too hot in the duvet. So if a duvet is too warm or it's not breathable, you will interrupt your sleep because it is actually too warm. You're overheating under the duvet. Okay, what is a duvet? A duvet has got three aspects to it. It's got a top layer and a bottom layer and filling. Top layer, normally speaking, pure cotton. Bottom layer, generally speaking, pure cotton. Filling, a number of different fillings are available. Polyester is a synthetic fiber that we've covered earlier, and is one of the most popular fills for duvets. And the reason that it's liked in the industry is because it's fairly light. It has loft. In other words, if you press the duvet and it lifts again, it will lift again. It won't stay flat. The polyester duvet is non-allergenic, meaning that one of the problems with the natural fillings is that they will encourage, or they do encourage, dust mite and bed bug growth. So a synthetic filled duvet will not actually do that, except if dust does end up getting inside the duvet. and then dust mites have something to chew on, as they say. Synthetic fills, I'm just going to pass these samples around. Fiber puff is the first one that's coming around. Just handle both of them together, because the microfiber you'll feel is much lighter, traps a lot of air, and that's generally the current technology of synthetic fiber-filled duvets. Generally a hotel will have a down duvet, which we're going to go on to just now, because they're much more luxurious, and a synthetic filled duvet of a unical or a microfiber type. And for those guests that have allergies to down. The natural fills, there are a number of natural fills, generally not used much in the hospitality industry. Cotton fibers, silk fibers, and wool fibers. They're not generally used in the industry because they don't have a lot of loft. They are generally summer weight products only. And the care of silk and wool duvets is quite difficult. You cannot put a silk duvet into a washing machine and hope it's going to come out the same size or in one piece. So then they need dry cleaning and that sort of thing. So they generally are not used in the industry. The most popular fills used in the hospitality industry are down and feather, or a combination of down and feather. The two samples that I'm passing around now are duck down and duck feather. They're labeled so it's easy to identify. The duck down is much lighter and traps much more air than the feather does. Okay. I just want to make a point that down is a byproduct, feathers and down are a byproduct of the food industry. There are terrible there is one terrible, photograph, it's not a video, photograph that has been taken, they believe in China, of actually live ducks being plucked for their feathers. That is not how the industry actually operates. It is a byproduct of the food industry. Obviously, we have ducks, we eat duck and geese and goose meat. So therefore, that's where the product comes from. It's important to understand that from the point of view of how the product should be processed as well. The down and feather must be sterilized. It must be washed and sterilized because it comes from an abattoir at the end of the day, before it is filled into a duvet. The natural down and feather has a wax layer. That's how a duck remains dry in the water. And that needs to be removed during the scouring process in order to make the fiber washable at a later stage once it's been filled into a duvet. If it does not happen, if the down and feather is not washed or sterilized, it will clump during washing. So that answers the second part of the question, which is, are they washable? Yes, the products are washable. The myth in the industry is, however, that down duvets cannot be washed. As long as the product has been correctly processed and is sourced from the correct places, it will be washable and is washable. Let me just see what I need to cover here as well. The difference between down and feather is quite an important factor. It's a combination of down and feather that determines how expensive and how light the duvet is. The down is much lighter than the feather. Therefore, the higher proportion of down will trap more air and will be a warmer duvet and a lighter duvet than the feather duvet. It's an important factor to understand, because one can go from 90% down to 10% down, and the cost of the product and the comfort of the product is quite different. The reason that the comfort is affected is because a light duvet will encourage good sleeping patterns. A heavy duvet will not do that. If you sleep under a light duvet, every time you turn, generally speaking, the person will not wake up. If one sleeps under a duvet, a heavy duvet or a blanket, every time you turn, you're turning against the weight, and you're coming partially out of that sleep. And I haven't seen I haven't looked at statistics, but I think we turn something like about 50 or 60 times a night. Okay. The filling power is what I was referring to earlier. If you look at this diagram here, one would be a cylinder filled with 100 grams of down. That would be goose down. Goose down. Number 2 would be a cylinder filled with 100 grams of duck down, which means that your duck down will trap 30% less air than goose down on average. And number 3 are feathers. So the feathers trap nearly, let's say, 60% less than down. Therefore, that combination of down and feather is an important factor when it comes to the construction and the manufacturing of a duvet. A goose down duvet would be lighter and also more expensive than a feather duvet as well. The casing is quite an important factor because it should be 100% cotton, making it natural, making it breathable. The construction of the duvet is quite important. You see the sample that came through now was sewn in squares. That's quite an important factor from a maintenance point of view, because when you wash the product, you don't want the filling to move to other parts of the duvet. So sewing the duvet in squares and trapping the filling in those squares means that's where the filling will stay. The channel duvets are a much lower cost option for the industry, and that's where you get long channels sewn into the duvet. And invariably what happens is that the filling ends up at the wrong end. The filling ends up at the feet of the bed where you don't want the filling, and vice versa. So it's an important thing to have a square or a quilted type duvet.
Are there different casings so that the feathers don't come out?
Yes.
Because I know a more expensive one sort of keeps more feathers in, but they still seem to wiggle their way out.
Yeah, down-proof fabrics are used as casings for down-filled duvets. There are a variety of down-proof fabrics available in the market, and all it's a very tightly woven fabric that will prevent the down and the feathers from actually penetrating through.
So a higher thread count would also keep it in a lot.
Absolutely. There are other factors involved in that as well. The stitching is quite important, because the stitching must not break any threads, because if threads are broken, then that's the point where feathers and down can come through as well. The type of feather is also quite important, and we've come across in the industry chicken feathers that are used instead of duck. And the problem with chicken feathers is that they have a very pointy quill, and if the filling is not right, then you will find that those chicken feathers will penetrate the fabric far more easily than a duck or a goose feather.